and for your willingness to serve if confirmed. In 2019, you sent out a letter to the Department of the Interior, the department that you've now been nominated to lead. And in that letter, you mentioned some concerns that you had with decisions regarding national monuments. And as I recall, the decisions in particular you were referring to, dealing with monuments, were things that you were worried might have been influenced by those who graze, mine, or use water on federal lands. So I want to ask you a question, just a brief yes or no answer will suffice here. Do you think it's appropriate for stakeholders to, people who have some sort of economic interest in the land or some sort of connection to the land, like communities where people use those lands for grazing and for other purposes, incidental and necessary to their day-to-day lives, to be involved in the national monument designation process? Or were you saying in that letter that you think such people shouldn't have a role in it?
Senator, I think with national monument designations, of course, it's folks on the ground, stakeholders, everyone deserves to have a say in those. We've had some of those come through our committee, and I realize it's a long process.
I'm pleased to hear that you're okay with having stakeholders have a say in it, because people who live close to the land are very much affected by it. Now, in Utah, national monuments have become something of a political football, and they're certainly poised to become even more of a political football. One that's tossed back and forth between political parties. Now, President Clinton and President Obama respectively designated some national monuments in Utah. President Clinton designated the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument back in 1996. And then 20 years later, President Obama designated the Bears Ears National Monument. President Trump reduced those monuments, consistent with the language of the Antiquities Act, requiring that the monument extend no further than the space that's necessary to be set aside to protect the purposes at issue. Do you think it's helpful when monuments end up bouncing back and forth between presidential administrations? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the American people and those who live near and are affected by these lands?
I understand what you're saying, Senator, and I know that the Antiquities Act is reserved for the President, whoever that may be, and not the Secretary of Interior. But I will say that, yes, it does appear that those things have gone back and forth depending on who's in office.
Do you think that this ricochet effect that we're talking about could be a result of presidents making monument designations that are not broadly supported by both political parties, particularly within the communities most immediately affected by them?
Well, it has been my experience. Most of the lands bills, most of the legislation that has come out of my subcommittee and our committee of natural resources on the House side have been more successful when they've been bipartisan. Yes.
And in this circumstance with national monuments, because we've given some 110 years ago, quite inadvisedly in my opinion, we've given presidents sweeping authority over this area. This eliminates, as they might see it in the moment, the need for bipartisan action. And yet I think in order to avoid the ricochet effect that we're talking about, that we both agree is a bad thing, we need to make sure that there is widespread local buy-in. Now, we didn't have that with Bears Ears in 2016. We didn't have that with Grand Staircase 20 years earlier. And I think it's important to point out here, and I want to make sure you're aware, that of the 11.5 million acres of national monument designations occurring on land among 40 states over the last 25 years, 3.25 million of those are in Utah. That's 28%. Some of these monuments are quite large. And in Utah, the Grand Staircase and the Bears Ears National Monuments were originally 1.9 million acres and 1.3 million acres. Added together, that's larger than 2 Delawares. Now, do you think monuments of this size accurately reflect and embody the charge that Congress provided in the Antiquities Act to the effect that, quote, "The limits of the parcels shall be confined to the smallest area compatible with the proper care and management of the objects to be protected." Is that usually something that in one state will be larger than 2 Delawares?
Senator, I want to say I'm a little jealous that you're from Utah and I'm from New Mexico, because I know you have so much beautiful land there and a lot of history. I've been to Bears Ears, and the Pueblo Indians' ancestral homeland is there, and I realize it covers a very wide space.
I appreciate you paying the compliment, my state. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. But the monument designation doesn't make them more beautiful. It does tend to make the communities that don't support them impoverished, and that's what concerns me.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate you sharing that knowledge with me.